and welcome to the Year 5 Mathematics curriculum for 2024. So if you're in Year 5 in Australia, this is the sorts of things that you'll be getting taught. First things first, all the information that I've got here come from the ACARA and SCARSA websites. They're pretty much organisations that are involved with the curriculum, as in what you need to study. They divide everything up into 3 strands: number and algebra, measurement and geometry, and statistics and probability. And within those, there are also substrands. So think of strands as general categories. Substrands are just little smaller groups within the larger categories. And then within those, you'll have content descriptors, which are the things that are going to be shown in Year 5, things that are going to be taught. There are 25 of those. We'll go into them now. So, number and algebra. The first substrand is called number and place value. The first content descriptor is identifying and describing factors and multiples of whole numbers and then using them. So factors are numbers within other numbers, such as 2 and 4 are within 8, because 2 times 4 equals 8. And multiples is like the other way around. So as an example, the multiples of 4 would be 8, 12, 16, 20, etc. Pretty much just times table values. So the second content descriptor is just about using estimation and rounding to check answers. So if you had something like 96 plus 98, both of those numbers you could round up to 100. 100 plus 100 is 200, so 96 plus 98, the answer should be around 200. The next one is solving problems involving multiplication of large numbers by 1 or 2 digit numbers. So an example of that could be, a 5-digit number multiplied by a 1-digit number would be a perfect example of that. And it says to use efficient mental and written strategies and appropriate digital technologies. That's really just meaning digital technologies a lot of the time will mean just calculators, whilst the mental and written strategies will just be, pen on pencil to paper. The next, or the continuation of the substrand number and place value, solve problems involving division by 1-digit number, including those that result in a remainder. So it's just really short division that involves remainders. So let's say 25 divided by 3, they'll give you 8 remainder 1. And then the last content descriptor is just about using mental and written strategies and digital technologies, calculators, to solve problems using the 4 main operations: adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. The next substrand is called fractions and decimals, and the first content descriptor is comparing and ordering common unit fractions and then just putting them on a number line. So it could be an example of, let's say, having a quarter, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4, which is of course a whole, and just having that on a number line. Investigating strategies to solve problems with addition or subtraction of fractions. This is fairly straightforward because it's just got the same denominator. So something like 3/4 take 1/4 equals 2/4 as an example. The next one is just recognizing that place value system goes beyond hundredths. You probably have a look at thousands and 10,000ths. So yeah, we'll probably only look about that far. So only a little bit past the second decimal place. And then comparing, ordering, and representing decimals, just building familiarity with them, putting them in order, and understanding just the basic place value concepts when you start going into tenths and hundredths. Okay, the next substrand is money and financial mathematics. And here the only content descriptor is just creating simple financial plans. So it could be something as simple as, saving a certain amount of money per week for so many weeks. It's just really getting the opportunity to involve money to simple multiplication, addition, or subtraction based sums, really. The next substrand is patterns and algebra. Now the first content descriptor here is about number patterns with fractions, decimals, and whole numbers, only ones involving addition and subtraction. So they can use either just fractions or either just decimals or either just whole numbers, and then just creating number patterns as a result. The next content descriptor is, in a way, and one of the early parts of algebra where you're trying to figure something out, unknown values, while using multiplication and division to figure it out. So let's say if I bought 4 apples and it cost me $20, it's just about trying to figure out how much would the apples cost to equal that. Okay, measurement and geometry. Substrand 1 of 4, using units of measurement. So, choosing appropriate units of measurement for length, area, volume, capacity, and mass. Just building familiarity with all the different units there. Calculating perimeter and area of rectangles using familiar metric units. Fairly easy, I guess. Perimeter just adding the numbers, 4 numbers around the outside, and the area of the rectangles will just be multiplying one value of the short side of the rectangle by the value of the long side of the rectangle. Comparing 12 and 24-hour time systems and converting accurately between them. Now the next substrand is shape. Here it's about connecting three-dimensional objects with their nets and other two-dimensional representations. So it's pretty much just forming that connection between, for example, making a rectangular prism, which will be a result of 2 squares or rectangles on the ends and then 4 rectangles in the middle. There might be easier sorts of shapes to make as well. I guess a very common one as well is just making like a 6-sided cube. Oops. And that's all that there is for shape. The next substrand, location and transformation, using a grid reference system to describe locations. So it's really just gaining familiarity with not just up, down, left, right, but also north, east, south, west to help distinguish about where you need to go using the grid reference system. A little bit more sort of like a lead-in into the Cartesian plane for next year. Describe translations, reflections, and rotations of two-dimensional shapes. So that's mainly got to do with translations, shifting things on a grid. A number of squares up or down or left or right. Reflections is just a mirror image, so flipping something over a line, and then rotations is just spinning something around, rotating it. So an example would be a rectangle where the long side is pointing to the left and then rotating at 90 degrees, so the long side is pointing up instead. And lastly, applying enlargement transformation, so making shapes have the same proportions but making them bigger. And the last one is geometric reasoning, and that's estimating, measuring, and comparing angles using degrees, and then constructing angles using a protractor. So there's a few different types of angles to look at. And using protractor, that was just a little tool that will help to be able to measure how big certain angles are. Statistics and probability is the final strand that we'll be looking at. So the first substrand of the two is chance. List outcomes of chance experiments involving equally likely outcomes and representing these probabilities of these outcomes using fractions. So a real clear example of that is when you flip a coin, it could be heads or tails, there's a 1 in 2 chance of it being heads, so that's a half chance of it being heads. So that would be the fraction that you would use for that. So there might be an instance of you doing these experiments and then recording the results, or at the very least, as it says, listing what can happen. Recognizing that probabilities range from 0 to 1. 1 being something that will happen, 0 being something that cannot happen. If you roll a 6-sided die, it can't be a 7. If you only roll it once, there's only dots from 1 to 6 shown on the die. If you flip a coin, the probability will be 1 that it'll be either heads or tails. They're the only options. It has to be those. The final substrand is about data representation and interpretation. So the first content descriptor is about posing questions and collecting categorical numerical data by observation or survey. So it could be something like going to another class and asking all the students there, which out of these options is your favorite ice cream, and then recording the results. Now the second content descriptor is about constructing displays such as column graphs, dot plots, and tables appropriate for the data type, either on computer with digital technologies or without, just doing them on paper. So it could be an example of what I just mentioned about your favorite ice cream flavor, and then putting that on a column graph as an example. And then lastly is describing and interpreting the different data sets in context. Being able to actually get the information from what you have been able to draw or what you've been able to see. But really understanding what the numbers mean and what the graphs mean. So that was all 25 content descriptors. For further information, you can go to the ACARA website or the SCARSA website. I'll have links to those in the description below, and there'll also be more detailed videos on this YouTube channel about each of these content descriptors. If you have any further questions, just